Vince, you're on a roll here. Why don't you take over Buffalo?
Oh, man. We're going from Boston to Buffalo.
Can't wait to get to the goalies.
Oh, man. All right. Well.
You just want to see Vince pronounce Ukapeka.
Listen, Buffalo will put them in the same era as New Jersey. Last year, people had high hopes for Buffalo. They thought they were going to take that next step, but as we saw, they did not. So last year's standings, basically 39 wins, 37 losses. Their power play ranked 29th, which we will talk about why that's terrible with the players they have. 16.6%. Who's in? Ryan McLeod, Jason Zucker, Nicholas Abu-Kabul, Beck Malenstein, and Sam Lafferty. I would say all bottom six non-fantasy players. Who's out? Jeff Skinner, the one who hasn't made a playoffs in 13 years. Victor Olofsson, who went to Vegas. And, man, these names. Gergensons. Yeah! Man,
Well done.
You did on purpose to give me this team. All right, let's go with the tiers. Wow, these tiers. Okay, we'll talk about the first player. We have no players in tier 1, 91 points plus. Tier 2, we do have one player, 80 to 90 points. And I'll make Junior start off with this guy. Tage Thompson, after his horrible season last year, Junior. What do you... Talk to me.
So he came off a career year, right? Where he had... One second. Something's loading here. Okay. Where he had 94 points in 78 games. So he was pacing for 99. Something he never even came close to. So, like, the trouble I have with Tage Thompson is that he went from pacing 71 points to 99 and then 65 in this most recent year. Who is the real Tage Thompson? He has the physique and the attributes to be that point per game player. I don't know if he could be that 100-point player. Like, I don't know. So, look, if Tage Thompson, Buffalo goes as Tage Thompson goes. If Tage Thompson doesn't go, Buffalo's doesn't go. The Sabres don't go. It's as simple as that. And the problem last year with Buffalo was that nobody went. Tuck regressed. Skinner regressed. Cousins regressed. Like, everybody regressed except for Peterka taking a step forward. So, I mean, we'll get to all those players. So, back to Tage Thompson. I think he's easily a 30-goal scorer. I think that should be a minimum achievement for Tage Thompson. I like where we put him, and I'm the one who put him there. So I like where we put him at a point per game. I think that's who Tage Thompson could be. I don't think he's that 100-point guy, but I do think he's that point per game player. His save percentage, shot percentage went down 4% from the year before, where he had his career year. So I see that improving a little bit. The power play just needs to be better. If the power play improves, and I think it can, then he'll go back to point per game basis. Tage Thompson is a point per game player and should project to be a point per game player throughout the prime of his career.
Nicholas.
I don't even think he's hit his prime yet.
No.
I don't think he's hit his prime yet. And why do I say that is because... Okay, so Asterix, I do own him in fantasy. But the reason I say that he hasn't hit his prime yet is because he's only played 372 games in the NHL. Part of that is injury problems. But the other part of that is Dauber always says that these bigger players, the big-bodied players, and he's 6'6", take about 400 games for them to actually hit their stride in the NHL. And he's just about getting into that 400-game mark, right? Tage Thompson has proven that he could bury the puck. In the last 3 years, he's averaging 41 goals. That's his average in the last 3 years. And about a point per game, like you said, average last 3 years. So that's where I feel that he is. He's an 80 to 82 point, 85 point player, top line center on this team. And we're talking about 35 to 40 goals every single year. So if that's valuable in your league, if goals are counted higher in your fantasy league like they are in most of ours, then this is a player that is a must own, and don't sell him, because I've had a few offers. Don't sell him short because he had an off season last year. I still think his 3-year average is what you should be looking at.
I'll agree and disagree with you, Nick, because I think he'll be a 90-plus point player.
Wow.
I really do believe that. I think he's got all the assets to be a 90-plus point player. And I think the one downfall, not of him, but of his team, was 29 power play last year. The year he hit 94 points, he had 34 points on the power play. Last year, 16 points on that power play.
Yeah.
So if that power play gets going, which it should with the players that we're going to talk about on this team, he could be an easily 90-point player. So what Nick said is correct. If you own Tage Thompson, you hold on to him for dear life because he is going to break out at some point. He might go this year at 80 points, but at some point within now to 5 years, he's going to be a consistent 90-point player in my mind.
Also a new coach.
We'll see
right,
how he
in
gets
Buffalo,
used.
which is
No, wasn't he there?
Lindy Ruff.
Yeah,
Lindy Ruff is back. That's right.
So, he is the only player we have in Tier 2, which is 80 to 90. Tier 3, 70 to 79. Ah, man, I love this player. Rasmus Dahlin, who led his team as a defender in points last year. Nick, I'm going to go with you first. What do you think about this player?
Well, the number... Oh, I should... In my books, he's a number one defenseman.
Don't say it, Nick.
Yeah, I won't say what... but we're talking about a guy who has not hit his prime yet. He's 24 years old.
Ah, Jesus.
24 years
How
old.
How many seasons in the league?
He's been in the league already 6 years.
Wow. And how many, like...
So from 18 years old, he was a first overall pick, right? So from 18 years old, he's been in the league. And his last 3-year average, which I think we should look at here, he's had 63 points. So we're talking about a player that is top 15 in the league for defensemen in points every single season. You guys remember that trade that I did in LPHL?
Yep, for Nylander.
Nylander for Dahlin,
I
1
give
for
you hell
1.
for that one.
And Junior gave me hell for that one, saying that you stole Nylander
Yeah.
and you completely destroyed AJ, listener AJ Mavrukas, who, by the way, one of our favorite listeners.
Building a nice team in Loose Pucks.
Building a nice team in Loose Pucks Hockey League. But I told you at the time, and I still stick to it today, that I got a top 15 winger, but I gave up a top 15 defenseman. And that is exactly what Dahlin puts up points-wise. Now, what do I think? Do I think he's a 70-point defenseman? I think he absolutely can be. He was on pace for 60 last year. The year before that, he was on pace for 77. His 3-year average right now is 55, but he has not hit his prime yet. So I see Dahlin taking another step forward this year, back into that 70 to 80-point pace.
Yeah, look, I know when we first brought up the topic of number one defenseman, I was on the fence, but after reviewing and analyzing his stats, he's a number one defenseman. So why do I think he's a number one defenseman? Well, in the last 3 years, like Nick said, he's averaging a 67-point pace. So 3-year timeline, 67-point pace. With that has to come reliability on offense and on defense. First of all, he plays 25 minutes a game. 25 minutes a game. Now, your first instinct tells you Dahlin is just an offensive defenseman. No, he's not. 24% of the shorthanded time, 66.7% of power play. He blocked 155 shots last year. So he's a number one defenseman.
He finished top 10 in points for defensemen.
Top 10 in points.
Last
And it was a little bit of an off year for Dahlin offensively last year.
I
And
agree.
the whole team took a step back. But Dahlin, I think we have him... I think he flirts point per game at his best. And and if not, he's a 70-point defenseman to me.
Which is still top 10.
Before he turns 25, he will play 500 games in the NHL.
Crazy.
That is unheard of. And he's just developing more and more. Last year, we saw that they tried to get his defensive game going, which he did. Unfortunately, the whole team crumbled. I think the changes they made this year is going to help him. And I feel that power play will go as soon as a coach gives him free reign on that power play. I feel last year there was a bit of restriction for him on the power play, and that's why he struggled. But if there's a coach that gives him free reign on that power play, he could easily hit that tier. It's not even a question. So, tier 4, we've got a few players in tier 4. So, we'll start with Alex Tuck Jr.
So I own Alex Tuck in 2 leagues. Unsung hero, I would say. Someone I didn't expect to be that successful. And last year, obviously, like everybody else on this damn team, took a step back. So he went from point per game pace, so 88 point pace, to 65. I mean, that's a big drop. But at the same time, we don't know who Alex Tuck is. In his time with Vegas, never paced for more than 58. In his time with Buffalo, he did 62, 88, and 65, which is why I have him placed here in the 60 to 69 point pace, because history tells us that's where he belongs. And I'd love to be a homer and say he's going to be 70 to 80 point player, but the reality is he hasn't shown that. And his shooting percentage fluctuates. His point per game pace fluctuates. Everything fluctuates, which tells me he's not a consistent player. And someone who's not consistent, I can't just automatically assume he's gonna improve with everybody else improving. And the thing with Buffalo is they have a lot of young guys coming up. If Jack Quinn could stay healthy, he's gonna threaten Alex Tuck if he doesn't stay consistent. JJ Peterka has already shown signs of progression. They have Coolidge in the ranks that we'll get to later, who could also come up and play on the wing. So there's a lot of bodies on this team, a lot of young bodies on this team, without mentioning Zach Benson or Consta Helenius and so on. So Alex Tuck, the good thing about him in fantasy is that he's often associated and paired with Tage Thompson. So what did we say before? As Tage Thompson goes, the Sabres go. As Tage Thompson goes, Alex Tuck will go. But I still think Alex Tuck gets maxed out more so than Tage Thompson does, which is why I have him between 60 and 69 points. Look, on a really, really, really good year, he could pass 70, but not much more than that.
Well, I'll say that he is a 60 to 65 point player. And I think that's who he is. I think that's who he's been. I think the fact of the matter is that he had that 1 year that he paced for 88, but never before that. And never after that. That was 2022-23, so it wasn't that long ago. But still, Alex Tuck is... The reason why he's so effective is because Tage Thompson is 6'6". Alex Tuck is 6'4". How do you move these guys away from the net? You know what I mean? Your first line is basically monsters, and they're coming after you. It's a great problem to have, but I just don't see him as talented enough to get more than those 65-point pace, which is still fantasy relevant.
At his salary, definitely. Especially
at his salary, but not necessarily superstar top-line caliber.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on what you said, Nick, when he was... in the process of getting 88 points, or on game 2, his shooting percentage was 16.5 that year. Something that's unsustainable. Tuck is there
for him.
Excuse me. Yes, for him.
Because Pasternak averages 16.
But I think Alex Tuck is the player who will be relied on to be a good two-way winger to take the pressure off of Tage Thompson on that defensive game. I feel 60 to 69 points is his his ceiling. I feel his floor is 60 points. His ceiling could be 69, maybe 70 points.
Sorry, I can't help with that.
Oh,
You can learn more about logging your health data with
Nice. Siri wanted to be part of the podcast. So yeah, I feel he's there. I think we have him in the right tier. Like Nick said, if Thompson goes like a phenomenal year, then Tuck will follow in and maybe be able to get over that 70 points. Our next player who was very surprised last year, JJ Peterka. Nick, you own him, so I'm going to go with Junior first.
Oh, yay. JJ Peterka, someone I thought would just be a flash in the pan because I didn't know much about him. But this kid's a good player, man. This kid is a really good player. And in his rookie season at 32 points in 77 games. So, you know, like we repeat often on this podcast, an elite, not a generational, but an elite rookie campaign is 45 to 50 points. 32 is about like a tier below. He backed that up with a 50-point production last year, 28 goals. They lost Skinner. Didn't really replace him with a top 6 player. So I think JJ Peterka gets a boost in opportunity. I see him taking another jump in the 60 to 69 point range. Is that his ceiling? No, I think in the future he could probably go up one more like a tier. I won't go as far to say as that I think he could be a point per game player, but given the opportunity that he has in front of him, he can hit the 60 to 69 point mark this year. He only had 42% of the power play last year. I think that goes up a little bit this year. He only played 16 minutes of time on ice. I think that goes up a little bit to maybe 17 and a half to 18. So I think everything is aligned for him to have the opportunity. It's up to him to take it. And I think he can based off what we've seen so far. He's shown a nice, consistent progression, and I like that.
So I shouldn't take all the credit in the world for discovering JJ Peterka, and I know that there's a lot of scouts out there that say it was them, but fantasy wise, Pete Bliss, who is one of our Project Llama, he owns Checks and Balances. I'm in a league with him in another league, and he had drafted JJ Peterka very high. And I said to myself, who is this kid? So I went out and I started doing some research, and he's the reason why I picked him in LPHL. 6 foot left wing player.
Pete, he owes you, Pete.
I owe him, yeah, exactly. Started the year off in the first quarter with Dylan Cousins and Benson on the second line, and just started progressing more and more and more. And all of a sudden, he's on the line with Tage Thompson and Alex Tuck in the third and fourth quarter. And there's a reason for that, is because he's a great player that creates on his team, on his line. He's a puck mover. He's a good skater. He does everything well. And 28 goals in his sophomore season is nothing to sneeze at. 28 goals in your sophomore season is telling me that you have potential for 30, 35 goals in this league. He's only played 161 games, so he's not even past that 200 game mark, which Dauber says is important for players around that size. So sky's the limit. I agree with you. I think that this year is a 60-point year for him. I don't think higher than that necessarily this year, but the kid is only 22 years old. So in his prime, we might be looking at a 70 to 80-point player.
Yeah, like
if progression can maintain.
Yeah,
right?
I won't. This kid's a goal scorer, and like I said, he will be in the 669. But in a few years, if he hits that 40 goals, don't be surprised. I feel he could be that 40 goal scorer, 45 goal scorer per year, because he's just got the talent, and he's a pure goal scorer. He shoots first, pass second. And that's what makes him such a good correlation with Tage Thompson, because Tage Thompson could be both. He can be a giver, and he can take the shot if he has to. So I feel next year is another year of progression for Peterka. And then I think after that, he'll get into those 35 to 40 goals a season.
That's high praise.
Yeah.
For a young player, expected goals for at 5-on-5, he's at 52%. That's really good.
The final player we have between 60 and 69, and I think we put him here because he had a phenomenal campaign with Team Canada. And this is Dylan Cousins. Cousins or Cousins?
Cousins.
Depends who you ask.
Cousins? So Dylan Cousins. Junior, you own this player.
So I'll go second.
Yes, and Nick, you'll go first.
So in 22-23, he paced for 69 points. But he took a step back last year. He got only 47 points last year, 49-point pace. This is a player that maintained the same amount of shots that he did the previous year. His shooting percentage dropped by 5%. His career average, though, is 10. He's still very young, so we'll see where this kind of goes. But Dylan Cousins has taken a little bit of a step back, and I think his fantasy outlook took a little bit of a step back as well. Do I think that he's a 60-point player? I think he could get there this year. I do think that. I don't think he's going to be a 70-point player this year. The kid is only 24 years old, very much young player who's not hit his prime. But I kind of see him as a 65 to 70-point player in his prime. Like, that's the max that I see Cousins going. And that's kind of a little bit the reason why I had traded him away in LPHL.
To me.
To you. Is because I kind of saw him in that 65 to 70-point range in his prime, not necessarily the top goal scorer that he showed in 22-23, where he scored 31 goals. So time will tell whether I was right or not. The fact of the matter is that I grabbed Peterka as well. And Peterka, I think, is going to kind of be in that similar vein as him, maybe surpass him a little bit. I don't know. What do you think, Junior?
I think last year was just, again, a natural regression because everybody regressed. I do see him, I think, on a really good year, like his best career year would be a point per game. If he has a career year.
Wow.
But I do think he can lie somewhere between 70, 72 points. I think that's like going to be his average.
Still very good.
But from a fantasy point of view, if you add the shorthanded points and so on and so forth, that could make the difference for the point per game. So that's what I really liked about him. And at the time, our trade was, I believe it was, I traded you Dylan Larkin for Dylan Cousins, a second-round pick, and Jonathan Drouin, who had just been signed by the Habs or traded by to the Habs. Anyways, which obviously I lost the best player in that deal. But this year, I do see him between the 60 and 69 points. And I would have said, you know what, the power play really sucked last year, and that's why he didn't produce as much. But, I mean, he was a 18-point player on the power play. Last year was only 10 points. So that's not the biggest difference. His shooting percentage dipped a lot from his career year, from 14 to 9. I just think last year was a really frustrating year for him, and he fought and broke his hand. I don't know if you guys remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all signs of frustration, and I think it's a learning process for him. And I think he tried to go above and beyond what his means to fulfill certain needs that are not up to him to fulfill. And they improved their bottom six a lot this year, and we'll get to it when we talk about Dom's model. And I think that'll alleviate that pressure of him of really having to be that defend my teammates, the leader, shorthanded guy, and put up points and being a power play guy. So all that together, look, his last 3 seasons, if we average it out, 59-point pace. As a young guy, you naturally see a progression. I see him between 60 and 69 this season.
This season, I see. It all depends the chemistry he gets with Jack Quinn. I think Jack Quinn's the wild card on this line, and I know Faceoff has Jason Zucker as his other winger, but I don't think that's gonna last long. I think Benson's gonna make his way up that line. So I believe, like Nick, I believe his maximum might be between 65, 70 points on a good year. But he could have that point per game season if his line mates progress with him. So Jack Quinn to me is the wild card. He can be a phenomenal player. But he's 23, he'll be 24 this season, so he's still young. Hasn't hit his prime yet. But I think he needs to build off of the Canada success he had in that tournament. And hopefully he can come in training camp healthy and get good chemistry with Jack Quinn on that second line.
And a positive for Dylan Cousins, who's young, 79 games played, 81 games played, 79 games played. So
He's
knock on wood, but that's a skill, like Nick likes to say.
power
Staying
play.
healthy is a skill.
Yeah, power play D-men where I feel they're a little crowded. So
Well, we have the lead dog, right?
yeah, Darlene is PP1. There's no question about it. But then last year, at the end of the year, they went to pick up Byram, and then they had Owen Powers that they drafted first overall. Junior, quickly, how do you see this defenseman power play work out?
Darlene will get like a minute and a half of this power play. I mean, last year the last 3 years, he averaged 65, 66, and 66% of the power play. I don't see that changing at all. So Darlene is the go-to guy. Owen Power is the type of defenseman. I had him and I just traded him away because I was cap restrained, and at $8 million, he wasn't quite producing enough for an $8 million player. He's one of those guys that'll get you a lot of maybe 5-on-5 points, but will never have enough opportunity on the power play to produce even more. And with the addition of Byram, who I think is more of a one-dimensional player than Owen Power is, I kind of think he'll eat away at the potential points of Owen Power. But in the end of the day, there's one guy here for points on defense. At least no one else comes close to 60 points a season other than Darlene. Byram could flirt with 40. Power could flirt maybe with 40, but I don't see them ever surpassing that until they get PP one time.
Nick, what are your thoughts?
So Byram is very confident in himself. He's a very confident player. He wants to be a power play guy. He wants to be a top point producing player. And he holds his own defensively. He's not only a one-trick pony necessarily. Don't forget that this guy was drafted 4th overall in 2019. You don't get drafted 4th overall necessarily if they think that you're a one-dimensional beast, right? Now, last season was the first season he played 73 games. He hasn't hit even the 200 game mark yet. Over the last 3 seasons, he's averaged like 42, 30, and 73. He's averaged, 60 games played? So there's a little bit of a banded boy / papier-mâché /
Loose leaf
paper issue with Byram. So let's see how he does going forward. He had a lot of concussions, and that's what kind of held him back. Do I see him being a 45-point defenseman? I do. And I think that they grabbed him in this team, and they paid for him to get him on this team to be a top 3 defenseman on this team, which means that they're going to give him minutes. They're going to give him 21 minutes, 20 minutes a game, which they averaged the last 2 years. So Bowen Byram has the opportunity to hit that 40 to 45 points. Is he going to supplant Darlene as the number 1 power play guy? No. I don't think that's in the cards. But still, for a depth young defenseman who has not even hit 24 years of age, he has that pedigree, just like Power, just like Darlene, to be a point producing defenseman. So I think this is a great risk for Buffalo to have taken in trading for Bowen Byram, and we'll see what his average is. But I'm kind of seeing that 40, 45 points for him on PP2. I think he has more offensive pedigree than Power, although Power has a great shot. I think Power is kind of going into that defensive mold right now. I don't know. We'll see how it plays out.
I won't add any more on all three defensemen. You guys said more than enough on them. I just think Buffalo has three defensemen whose transition game is above average, which is going to help their team. Now, the goaltending. Last year, we all thought Mr. Levy was going to come in and break the bank, right? How many drafts have you been where Levy was drafted way too high? So, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen.
Yes.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah.
Save percentage, .910. Goals against average, 2.57. Ninth in goals against expenses. GSE. At
Goals
515.
saved above expected.
You go, Nick. And backup, Devon Levy. Save percentage, .899. Goals against average, 3.10. 8 in whatever Nick said at 515. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. Can he start the season the way he ended the season last year? Nick, because Junior owns him.
I think it's time for UPL
Ooh, look at you with the initials. You go, boy.
to take that number one spot and run with it. I don't think Levy is ready. I think he showed that. I think Levy in the long run is going to have maybe as much, if not more, potential to be a better goalie than UPL. But right now, we've been waiting for so long for UPL to actually come out and show what he showed last year.
Is this the way his end of the season ended? Is it a blessing in disguise for Buffalo so they didn't have to hurry Levy into the NHL?
I think it was.
Yeah, and there's a clear sign of that. They signed James Reimer to a 1-year contract. James Reimer's not going to play in the AHL. So
That's right.
there's your sign that UPL is going to be the guy.
So
for
last
this
year, UPL had 63% quality start percentage. That's huge. He played well in 63% of the games that he entered.
His team wasn't good enough. That's the problem.
Right, exactly. 27 wins, 22 losses, 5 shutouts. You know, shutouts are not necessarily repeatable, but I think the save percentage of 9-10 is right about where he is. Lindy Ruff comes in. He's not necessarily a defensive coach, but he does play responsibly. And his team usually plays responsibly. I think UPL will repeat the breakout season that he had last year.
Junior, your thoughts?
I sure hope he does. I think they're better suited for it a little bit. Owen Power has a year experience, a year more experience. Samuelson has a year more experience. Bowen Byram is going to have a first full season with this team. It's a very young decor, and usually that's not a good sign. But the fact that they're developing together could benefit UPL in the long run. Like you said, adding Lindy Ruff creates a bit more of a structure. Their bottom 6 is much improved, so that's going to help as well. I think he can maintain the numbers. Look, the shutouts, I mean, the quality percentage starts of 63. I mean, that's what leads to the 5 shutouts, right? He outperformed what most people expected, and the shutouts have a lot to do with that. I see more of the same. More of the same, maybe a little less shutouts, maybe a little bit more wins, but I see about more or less the same for him. And as the team gets better, I expect him to have even better numbers.
Top prospects. I'm just gonna name them all, and you guys tell me if any of these guys get a sniff of the NHL this year. Yeah, Yuri Kulich, Devon Levy, Konsta Helenius, Noah Ostlund, Anton Wahlberg, Isaac Rosen, Adam Kleber. Does anybody get into even just a few games into the NHL? Because this is a young Buffalo Sabres team.
Well, I think Coolidge will have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whether it's a handful of games or a little bit more than that, The fact is that Coolidge is a player that is highly touted. He had 45 points with the Rochester Americans in 23-24 out of 57 games, but did very, very well with Czechia in the U20s in the World Junior Championships, 12 points in 7 games. I think Coolidge is highly touted. I think he's a goal scorer, and I think he will get the opportunity to show that, maybe not to a fantasy relevant all year degree, but maybe a watch list guy. In Dynasty, definitely somebody you should be owning.
I'm not going to say it's a hot take, but I do think there is a spot available for him, and it's the Zach Benson spot. I think Buffalo rushed Zach Benson last year. Best case scenario, Coolidge starts the year in the NHL and Benson starts the year in the AHL. I think for Buffalo's sake, it's better. Now, what determines that is going to be training camp. So if Benson can come out of the gate flying like he did last year and earn his spot, then he'll earn it. But I do think there's an opening there for Coolidge. If he's not going to play top 6, then keep him in the AHL. But if he outperforms Benson and earns it, then Benson's the one who's going to start in the AHL.
So training camp, you're saying?
Training camp. I think Coolidge is there. I think he's ready. He's there.
Okay, so to end off with the Buffalo Sabres, the final thoughts and prediction. 9 best offseason. Improved bottom 6 should keep them competitive in games. Easier matchups for rough to make.